our next session. This is Insights from Emerging Economies, and it's sponsored by P&G Connect and Develop. And we've invited 4 alumni who are currently operating in China, Saudi, Brazil, and India to give us our perspective on those economies. And our moderator, who is Bruce Sellery, is going to introduce them, so I'll just introduce Bruce. So Bruce Sellery, who's sitting here to my left, is the founder of Moolah Law. It's a personal finance training company focused on inspiring people to get a handle on their money. And Bruce was one of the founding members of CTV's Business News Network, which here in Canada is the, I guess you could call it an equivalent to CNN Finance Network, and spent many years as a financial journalist covering the markets and the economy, both as an anchor based in Toronto and as BNN's bureau chief in New York City. And prior to his move to broadcasting, Bruce was at Procter & Gamble, first in CBD and then in brand. He's an alumnus of the Governor General's Leadership Conference, and he's a professional member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers and a graduate of Queen's University School of Business. Yeah. I take it there are some Queen's alumni in the room. His best-selling book was published in early 2011 and is called Moolah Law: Why Smart People Do Dumb Things with Money and What You Can Do About It. And I would at least like to tell you one personal thing about Bruce. So you may not realize this, but you can name any show tune and he can burst forth singing it.
Wow.
Any show tune, okay? Try him out.
Almost any show tune.
Almost any show tune. Please welcome Bruce Sellery.
Thank you. Thank you. I am probably one of the few Procter & Gamble alumni who went from my little Cubeland job to wearing makeup every single day on television. So I should have gone back into beauty care because I learned so much about it. So welcome. Our focus in our panel discussion this morning is on emerging economies. And we practically have BRIC covered. So we have China, Brazil, India. Samir, unfortunately, is based in the Middle East. So we are going to ask him to put on a Russian accent, like a villain in a James Bond film, and then we'll totally be in compliance with BRIC. Are you in?
Schema.
Totally in. It's a schema. It's a disruption. It's a disruption. Thanks, Samir. I am going to give the briefest introduction of these rock star panelists that they have probably ever received in their lives. James Wei, executive board member at Beiersdorf, based in Shanghai. I am a consumer of their key product, Nivea Men. This is all thanks to them. So, and thank you, James. Danielle Bibas, Avon, marketing vice president, based in São Paulo, Brazil. P&G São Paulo, Brussels, Geneva, Toronto, right? Okay, good. Now, I should say, James, P&G Geneva, Cincinnati, Taiwan, Greater China, and then Avon, Asia Pacific, correct? Okay, good. Samir Ishak, who worked with me at P&G in Toronto in the mid-90s, P&G Toronto, P&G Saudi, P&G Brussels, now based in Saudi Arabia. The firm is called Abudawood, and it basically provides the eyes and ears for CPG companies like Procter & Gamble in that region, and we're going to talk more about that. And finally, Ramesh Vangal, P&G Geneva, Middle East, Central America, West Africa, PepsiCo Asia Pacific, Seagram Asia Pacific, currently Katra, India. We're going to talk more about that business. So that is the top line on our guests. And basically what I'm going to do is talk to each of them individually for a minute, just so we can hear more about their perspective, and then we'll include all of them in the discussion of some key themes that are both relevant and resonant as we think about emerging economies. So Danielle, I want to start with you. Brazil. You are back home. How does it feel to be back home?
Great. It was a great time for me. I spent 11 years outside of Brazil and came back when the country is absolutely booming. Lots of opportunity, I had a daughter, so being close to my family feels really good.
What's the number one difference working again in Brazil after having been away for so long?
I think the pace of the economy and the pace of growth. My categories that grow, that have low growth are at, I'd say, 9–10%. I have businesses growing between 25 and 30, and that's a very, very different day-to-day routine, and how do you make decisions, because with that level of growth, you can't skip a beat.
Can you give us an example of the essence of working in Brazil? I was there for days, New Year's in Rio kind of thing, so I don't have a sense for what it would be, which was fantastic, by the way. What's it like to work there? What's it like to work there?
It's chaotic, and it's very hot, and it's humid, and it's, I don't know, I think it's just the essence of a developing market where, rapid things change all the time, I'd say. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
James, what is the 30-second summary of your focus today? I know you have your fingers in many different pots, and you're on a plane a lot, as all of you are, but what's the 30-second summary on what you focus on today?
China, China, China.
That was good. You have 27 seconds to spare. There you go. Use them well. China is in the headlines almost daily. How would you characterize the climate for the business that you focus on today? What would you say about it?
I think everybody talk about China's booming, the things. I think to the people from the West, I think the biggest difference is you see the government involvement in China. It's almost everywhere. And part of the economy booming is really driven mostly by the infrastructure investment. And recently I just took my colleague from Nanjing to Shanghai in the bullet train in 1 hour. And the Beijing-Shanghai train should be ready later this year, 5 hours. So I'm looking forward, I took the train from Wuhan to Guangzhou in 3 hours. So in the future, the whole China, the way of running business will be fundamentally shift as the high-speed railway infrastructure is being completed throughout the country.
You've spent a lot of your career outside of the region. You were educated outside of the region. What's it like for you to be, I don't even know if you'd call it home, but what's it like for you to be back in the region? Would you call it home?
Yeah, I really enjoyed, and because I enjoy the food, I enjoy the people, the great service, and I like your comments about it's the new and the old. And you sort of in the I call the excitement that I still vividly remember when I was in the US, we had this discussion in the ballroom about this financial crisis. Then I went to the third-tier city in China for another company's board meeting. And I went out of the hotel room, I went to this night market. I saw tons of people piling up, eating, having good time. I said, what is the crisis? And that's really the fundamental difference. I guess very lucky if you're working in the developing part of the world, well, the market is growing, so you happen to be the right place at the right time. And so I always remind our people, don't get too cocky and get prepared for the worst time, and otherwise you're good, but maybe you're still not good enough. And right. When sometimes you look at the business growth, you start really getting arrogant, but then it's not the other guys on the other side of the ocean, it's not good. They work as hard,
right.
But just the economy is just not as strong as in emerging countries.
Samir, your focus is on the Middle East. Anyone who is breathing currently knows that that is a very newsworthy region right now. Before we get to that, I want to ask you to tell us about the business that you work in, because while you left P&G, you didn't really leave P&G.
Dobry den.
I have a question about Putin.
Okay.
Not Putin, Putin. Putin.
Yeah, this typecasting thing in Russian is not going to work. It's an exciting world. It's a turbulent world. Things change every second. You heard about pace, pace, pace. We have 6 countries. We have Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, Bahrain, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. My passport is a storybook. Every single airport knows me. It is brilliant, it is exciting, it is fun, because every single one of those countries, save for Saudi Arabia, is embarked in a revolution, and the business is growing at 25, 26%. Now, it's brilliant and turbulent and dramatic every single day. And Procter & Gamble Canada did prepare me for it, right, Harvey? It did prepare me for it. Your structured...
Was he like some of the benevolent dictators that
Yes,
are currently being
absolutely.
brought down? Harvey, if Twitter had been around in the 90s, I don't know if he would have lasted. I don't know.
Yeah, our structured minds, the way we structurally bring things down and break them down, just doesn't function anymore. Yeah. And the key theme for us in the Middle East is idle young men. 58% of the population of those 6 countries, about 175 million people, are below the age of 25.
Wow.
And that is a staggering number, and the opportunities are limitless. If you channel idle young men in the right direction, you have potential for growth. If not, you have what's going on right now. It can lead to radicalization, which happens. It can lead to mass migration, what happens. And it's just incredible being on the cusp of things happening that rapidly.
Tell us the basics of the business. So you do what? Your company
Well,
does
you
what?
guys put wings and make the ideas soar. We're in charge of landing gear. We make sure the product hits the ground and gets into the store every single day, all the time, with the best possible visibility at the lowest cost. And that's kind of what we do. So we cover about 250,000 stores directly in 6 countries. We have logistics services, we do key account services, we do everything that a Procter sales organization would do, and then we just have deeper coverage. We do logistics as well, make sure that your product is in these volatile regions safely enough to be consumed. And that's basically it. We're kind of the extension of those great ideas and thoughts that happen. We just make sure they reach the consumer every day.
Ramesh, I read your bio and I think you've been everywhere and done everything, and you're not done. You've got this new, relatively new thing in Catra, and I thought of you during the Martin Sorrell presentation where he referenced healthcare. He talked about healthcare as a theme. Could you use that as the springboard to tell us a bit about the sort of wellness and food focus for your business?
You know, all my life, I've actually been disruptive naturally. So my problem is, I'm trying to bring some schema into it. You know, I've always believed that you need to look for big changes to big things. Small changes to small things, it's incrementality. It ain't going to get you anywhere. So I've been on my own business now for 12 years, after the comfort of working with all kinds of big companies. What I'm trying to seek right now is to hit the healthcare load. And if you really look at it in very simple terms, healthcare, the US can't pay for. How can we take that same healthcare model and use it in India or China? So I'm looking at traditional medicine. When you look at traditional medicine, nobody is going to say, this is scientific. So what I'm trying to do is to take our traditional Indian Ayurveda medicine, which goes back 10,000 years, and I'm trying to figure out how it gets it through the FDA compliance. So that's really what it is. And frankly, I think we'll get there. And I have no idea what I'm doing there because I neither have any history. My only history to cleansing has been Procter. To energy is Pepsi. And after that, through spirituality, was Seagram.
You do know that's a stretch, right? That's a stretch. It's good. All right, theme number 1, volatility. Samir, the headlines break. Osama bin Laden has been killed. You have a personal thought, I assume. You soon after have a business thought. Can you give us both? What goes through your mind?
Well, Kaiser is right here. Kaiser Sharif, we kind of built the Procter Pakistan business together in the last 5 years. The first thought you have is, not again. Something's going to happen now. they are going to hit one of our offices, or just because they get mad and they hit the streets. So the number one thought is keep the people safe, keep the business going. We are paid to take the risk for the companies who want to have their products in these countries. The risk is our people. So 60% of what we spend our money on is people. We got to make sure the people are safe. We got a civil war in Yemen right now. Keep the people safe, secure the products, make sure you move forward slowly.
How do you keep the people safe?
This whole thing about being in touch on a daily, weekly, second basis, very, very important. And you have to change your leadership mode. We're always taught to be strong leaders, individualistic, very powerful, driving leaders. And you kind of have to change in order to get people to listen to you, to be loyal to you, to do what you want to say. Exercise restraint, because you don't know where the future is going to take you. You don't know where you're going to end up. The second is modesty. Put yourself in their shoes and really, really make sure you empathize with them. And not sympathize, but empathize. Sympathize is, that. Empathize is sitting there and truly understanding. And then you hold back, and you got to be tenacious to fight the right battles, because you can get people through pretty much anything if you do the first two. I don't take too much more time, but restructure the company. We live in a placid environment in the West, and so functional structure is prevalent. It's cost effective. You don't have duplication of work. You got to be more divisionalized. We're in a SWAT environment. We're in uncharted territory. It changes every day. They'll stop your trucks at the border. They'll boycott American products on a dime. You got to be ready to take action in a second. Keep your values there, but you got to change your structure from a functional, cost-effective structure to more of a divisional structure where everybody's an expert at doing things, and that creates that little village and that little team mentality that helps you through.
James, how do you think about volatility in a country like China, where there is uprising control, and a massive population? Surely there's no level of contingency planning that could ever factor in the variables that might crop up on any given day.
Well, actually, China is not as challenging in terms of the social unrest, in terms of the other things. But the biggest factor sometimes is the government policy. You have to deal with the change of policy. For example, right now, a lot of small businessmen are facing the government tighten up the credit. So you can suddenly realize all the distributors, wholesalers are all short of cash, as government want to control the economy so it's not overheated. So you can plan many things, but one day you wake up, there's a new policy. Then you just have to adjust your plan. And so the policy can be very favorable and can be also more inhibiting.
Ramesh, there was an article in The Economist recently that was a statistical look at Indians at the lower end of the economic spectrum getting a certain form of social assistance, and how that worked was quite often the payment of a bribe. As we think about volatility and working in these kinds of environments, how do you handle cultures where relationships get moved forward in quite different ways than we're used to in the West?
I think you've got to look for partnerships. You've got to make assessments on who's going to do what for you. There is no way in which you're going to reform the system. This is like world hunger. However, what you can do is to drive your relationships between those people, be they in government or otherwise, with whom you can find common cause. And I think despite corruption, there is a very large swath, large population of middle-class values and fairly good accounting and a legal system which works. And because of that, I think you can find common networks in between. So, for example, I'll give you a very practical idea. If you're bringing in machinery, and that machinery requires some facilitation at customs. This was true when I was with Pepsi. Are you going to pay that 2%? No. What you're going to do is you're going to hire a company which keeps within all of the appropriate FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and then you basically make an annual deal with him by which he takes care of it. So what's going to ultimately happen is the peer pressure within the group is going to force out the bad ones, if you like.
Danielle, when people think about Brazil, in some ways our perception is stuck in 10 years ago when crime rates were higher than they are today. But give us the picture of how that variable affects doing business there. Perhaps it wasn't as bad as it was before, but crime rates are certainly higher in Brazil than they might be in other more developed countries.
I think when you think about how do you package your products and how do you display them, there's still, if you go to drugstores in Brazil today, there's still a lot of stuff that is behind the counter because it's expensive and volatile to theft. But the crime rate has really, really gone down recently, and the middle class is rising so fast in Brazil. There's 100 million people in middle class today in Brazil, which is what is propelling the growth of the country. So I'd say packaging, is probably in the consumer goods industry what you get most affected with.
We'll segue to income distribution because it's relevant in all of the markets that you work in. In terms of the marketing mix, how, Danielle, do you think about it differently? Because in North America, the mom and her washing machine is kind of a ubiquitous phenomenon. Even if you make 30 grand a year, you might have a washing machine in your home. Not so in Brazil. So how do you think about that given the spectrum?
So one of the key differences and one of the things that we have been struggling with, or we try to convey, to folks in New York or the headquarters, is middle class people in Brazil make about $7,000 a year, where I think in the US is about 50,000. So it's a completely different level of purchase power that you have. And even though people will have, it's the inversion of values, right? You walk into these people's homes, there's not a proper wall, and there's not a proper toilet, but you will find a computer and a flat screen TV and an Xbox sometimes, and definitely radio. So it's a little bit of the inversion of values. So from a communications point of view,